Okay, class, today we're going to talk about the processes of biological evolution and natural selection. Evolution is the changes that happen over generations, the changes that they must be inheritable, which just simply means an organism can pass it on to their offspring. So if a father was really strong from going to the gym and working out all the time, his kids wouldn't necessarily be strong because that trait's not inheritable. But if he was tall, then his kids could be tall because height is a trait that you can inherit. Think about evolution as a changing process. So let's look at this picture. You see, we have a caterpillar. A caterpillar goes into its cocoon, hibernates, and then evolves into a butterfly. Now, that gives you an idea of how evolution changes things, but the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly is much, much quicker than the process of evolution. Some people get confused and that an organism can just sprout a trait overnight that they need to survive, but that's not the case. If a giraffe needed a longer neck, it wouldn't just overnight or even over the next couple years have a longer neck to reach those trees. It would take generations and generations of giraffes with longer necks reproducing to get that offspring with a long enough neck to reach the trees in that region. So that's just simply how evolution works. So now we'll talk about natural selection. It's the process of changes happening over time due to an organism best suited to their environment passing on their traits. So just like how evolution is about inheritable traits, natural selection can only occur with inheritable traits. This just means that an organism that has traits that are better for the environment that they live in will more likely survive over the same animal that doesn't have that trait. So let's go back to that giraffe example. So you can see these two giraffes are too short to reach the tree, but this giraffe can reach the tree because it inherited the longer neck. This happened over many of years for that giraffe to inherit the long neck for that environment. Animals that survive due to the other animals will go on to have children that are better suited for that environment. So that giraffe came from generations and generations of giraffes with longer necks that survived the other ones and passed down their neck. Now, animals that survive and have children that are better suited for the environment, this used to be called survival of the fittest. But that name is a little misleading because when people hear about it, they think that means like the bigger, stronger animals will go on to reproduce and then their offspring will be even bigger and stronger. But that's not true. Just because an animal is bigger or stronger than another of the same group doesn't mean it has more chance of survival. It just depends on the trait best for that environment. So like rat snakes are very similar in color except that they'll either have a green, orange, or black stripe. That is different depending on the area they live in and the terrain they go on. So if a snake with a green stripe was in the region where rat snakes with orange stripes lived, he wouldn't survive as long because he doesn't fit that environment. He doesn't have the right camouflage for the type of terrain. So the best study for natural selection is to look at Darwin's case with the finches. He went to the Galapagos Islands and studied some birds there called finches, and he discovered that there was 13 different types of finches that all evolved from one single species on the mainland. The way he realized this is that the birds had adapted their beaks over time best suited for the food in their area. Adaptations are just traits that help an organism survive. So the inheritable traits that we mentioned earlier, those traits that are inherited that make animals more suited to their environment for survival and reproduction are called adaptations. So Darwin realized that the birds had different beaks. The finches with long, pointy beaks ate insects from trees, tree bark. They were able to poke more. And then the finches with the harder, more round beaks, they grinded up large seeds and fruits for their food. So then over time, the finches that were able to get enough food and survive reproduced with other finches that had similar beaks, and then their offspring inherited the beak more suitable for food available in the region. So not all offspring will survive, though. The offspring will compete with each other for food and other survival resources. Just because they came from the same parents doesn't mean that they'll be identical, just like siblings who aren't twins. These are called, and there's slight differences, these are called genetic differences. So it simply just means like no two birds would be exactly the same. So they could come from the same parents, but this one might have slightly pointier beak to get those smaller insects. So he might outlive his brother whose beak isn't quite as pointy. So that pretty much wraps it up on biological evolution and natural selection. If you have any other questions or you want to do some more research, you can click on the two websites in the links below.